Hello, listeners. We are your co-hosts, Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley, for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart, and soul.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining Marie and I here on our Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast, the first for 2025. So we're welcoming in the new year, 2025. Marie, great to see you here. I hope you've had a wonderful festive season since I've seen you last.
Thank you, Janine. Yeah, it's been a wonderful, special time, spending time with family and taking some rest, but also having lots of laughter and joy together. So it's been a wonderful experience. How about yours?
Yes, it's been actually, I'm really grateful for being back with my UK family this year. So a much wider, bigger family here in the UK, and yes, it's been a wonderful family time, and I love my UK family. So I'm so enriched by having this time with them. So yeah, I'm coming in full of joy actually because of the wonderful times we've had together.
Lovely. Well, how wonderful that you got to spend it together. And we've come together to think about the past year and maybe the past 10 years that we've had, the past 14 years, 15 years that we've had together and we thought what a wonderful way as we start the new year to think about what we appreciate and what we're grateful for and what we can celebrate about our work and our lives. Because let's face it, some of the challenges that we're facing in the world have been very dark and have been very difficult for many people. And so not that we want to ignore that is fact, that is something that has been, but there is always light when there is darkness. So we were thinking about how do we celebrate what we've come through? How do we celebrate what we've achieved? And maybe even look in celebration as we're stepping into this new year and what that means for us.
Yes, thank you, Marie. And as you say, there's always going to be dark and light. And we also always share in the work that we do, you know, what we focus on is what we experience. So, and we also appreciate looking at the wisdom, the learning that the darkness brings. And it really supports us that darkness really does support us to identify what's truly important to ourselves. It is a guidance system of some sort, a very uncomfortable one, but it is guiding us to what brings in the light, what brings us joy, what we truly want to celebrate and be grateful for. Yeah. So what's coming up for you, Marie? I'm just so you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what you're saying. My mind's moving to the past and really acknowledging some of the highlights of the past year that have been really beautiful. But also, there were moments that were, and it was when you were talking about the darkness that I remember there were very difficult times and times I wasn't sure what the answer would come out of being in that darkness. And having to stay in the darkness a little bit more than I would have liked to had really helped me get clarity on some of the things you talked about, like what matters most to me, what values I was honouring, and why the darkness had perhaps entered my life, entered my heart a little bit. It was for an area of regrowth. And, you know, the UK at the moment is very dark at this time of year. It gets dark very early. And part of that darkness has enabled me in my own life to really wrap myself up and think about what's important to me and sit with it and get curious with it and play with it and let the tears fall if the tears needed to fall, but also let the joy come in the moments of the dark velvet is how I could describe it, because it was a beautiful experience to allow me to move through it and come out the other side and recognize the light in myself as well.
Yeah. What a beautiful story and gift that you've just shared, Marie. And again, this is what we do as coaches, don't we? We support our clients to not push aside, push down, throw out, ignore those dark sides. And when we say dark, we mean those difficult, challenging things that come up in our lives, but actually we support them to become aware of what's truly important for themselves.
Yeah.
And how to move forward into the lightness, into the joy, into the direction of their lives that they want to experience. And so that in itself is a joy to know that actually we don't need to squash anything. Because if we try to squash anything or ignore it, it always comes back somehow, some way, in a different form. So if we don't lean into it, it'll come back in various different ways. And it could be through our health, through sabotage, or whatever it may be. So that's something to celebrate, that actually there's a purpose to all of this if we choose to recognize it, so that we can come into where we're meant to be.
Absolutely. And I think, as coaches, we give a lot, we give a lot out, and we can, and I put my hand up here, I can forget about myself sometimes as I'm taking care of others. And I think that's an important message that we'd like to share with coaches and leaders who coaches. How are you taking care of yourself? How are you celebrating what you've achieved so far in your life to this date? The future is coming. The future can be anything we want it to be from our state of mind and our responses to things. But what have we done? What have we achieved? How have we appreciated ourselves as we've moved into the light, or as we've stayed in the dark a little bit? What's that given us? So these questions of reflection, I think, are really useful. I know I struggled as a reflector for many years. My form of reflection now takes the form generally of art or poetry rather than writing down everything that I'm experiencing. So we're encouraging you, coaches and leaders who coach, to think about how can you reflect upon this year, and how can you tap into the wisdom of the darkness, but also the joy of the lightness. How can you practice to reflect and support yourself to acknowledge where you are?
Mm. Yes, and to really appreciate, to reflect upon and create that awareness about what you're appreciating in both of those. I'm saying both, but potentially there's everything in between, those journeys into the exploration of what has been challenging and what brings you joy. So what is it that you are absolutely appreciating and recognizing is contributing to that, so that you can continue to build that into your everyday lives? So it's really getting clear about who you're being. What is it that you appreciate that you do, and what you're creating? And bringing with all of that compassion, that empathy, that self-care, that self-love, that is so important, because we know that as leaders in our own life, we are also potentially influencing others. So we want to be that model that we are human and we will never be perfect. There's always going to be scuffing of knees, and therefore wisdom, appreciation, joy, learning, growth, and so much more.
Lovely, Janine. As I'm looking at your background with that beautiful sunset behind you, or morning sunrise, it could be either morning sunrise. It's a moonrise. Okay, beautiful. So look at the world around you. See how that can support you in your reflections of your gratitude as well. I'm looking out of my window here. It's grey, but the trees look magnificent as they're blowing in the wind. The grass is still green. It might have a few leaves on it. The holly is still blooming. And there's lots to be grateful for out there as I help it as a way of supporting me to reflect on what's still green in my life and some of the things that need cutting back to allow me to recognize what's important as well.
That's a beautiful metaphor there, Murray. And actually, this is a moon set, not a moonrise. So actually, this photo that some of you may not be able to see behind me is an image of my old swimming hole, or beach, I should say, rather. And it was at sunrise. And as the sun was rising, beautiful sunrise coming up, sending reflections across to the other side, which is what you can see in the image, if you could see it. So there's these pink, bluey, purple clouds on the other side of the sunrise with the moon setting. So it's kind of like this, again, that duality of color, the darkness and the lightness, and everything in between is that's what's coming up for me as I reflect upon that image. So there's lots of color in there, even though actually it's quite dull at the same time because the sun is just waking up. But there's a lot of wonder to find in those different parts of our lives. And they're magnificent.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Janine. So we encourage you to go and find a beautiful spot, whether it's a sofa and you're wrapped up in your favorite blanket, or whether it's out in your garden or on a magnificent beach, as Janine has described. Go and find a spot for you that really inspires you. Take some time to rest, to take care of yourself, to practice gratitude for wherever you are in your life right now. And in any way, shape, or form that supports you to do your reflection, enjoy it.
Have a magnificent 2025. And we trust that there'll be the scuffing of knees, there will be the dark moments, and there are absolutely opportunities to see the light as well through all of that. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, coaches, leaders. And again, we invite you to share this podcast for those who perhaps could do with that recognition that it's time to do some reflection for self. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website www.empower-world.com and on our social media networks Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Be empowered.